Hello and welcome back. This will just be a short video on what I didn't get to in the last one, which is looking at principal square roots. And before I do some more in-depth examples, I want to stress the importance of the following. You need to pull all the negatives out from square roots and write them as the imaginary unit I before you do anything else. And I want to show you exactly what can go wrong if we don't do this. So when you look at this expression here, the square root of -1 times the square root of -4, we should think, oh, we're taking the square root of a -1. This is exactly I times the square root of 1. We need to pull out that negative sign first before we do anything else. So that'll be this first term. And then the square root of -4. Again, I need to rewrite this as I times the square root of 4. I need to pull out the negative sign and write it as an I before I do anything else. Now I can multiply these. I can simplify the first one, the square root of 1. Again, the principal square root of 1 is 1. So I times 1 is just I times. This guy over here, I times the square root of 4. The square root of 4 is 2. So this is going to be 2 times I. And again, simplifying, this will be 2 times I squared. But I squared is -1, and 2 times -1 is -2. This is the correct answer. One thing that we learned a while back is that we can multiply what's underneath the square root sign together. This is where things go wrong. We can't do that when there's negative signs involved. So what if we did? What if I wrote this as the square root of -1 times -4? Okay. This step here is where I've already gone wrong. When there's negative signs involved, we can't consolidate what's underneath the radical sign. But if we did, -1 times -4, negative signs cancel out. 1 times 4 is just 4. And the square root of 4 is 2. This is incorrect. We don't want to do this. Okay. And what's important is that this first step we can't do if there's negative signs involved. If there's negative signs involved, we can't multiply what's underneath the square root signs first. What we need to do is pull out the negative sign as an I. Also, what you'll notice is that I'm writing I in front of the square root sign. This is just a helpful trick for the following reason. If I wanted to write I times the square root of 2, this is a little bit easier to read than this, because it's hard to tell if the I is underneath the square root or if it's not, because this if the I is not underneath of it and this are very, very similar, and they mean very different things. So in order to avoid any confusion, I'm just going to put the I out front, and it'll be a lot easier to see when I'm multiplying that it's an I times the square root, and I'm not taking the square root of an I. So let's tackle some square root problems. Here again, before I do anything else, I look at this and I go, I have a negative under the radical. I need to rewrite this as I times the square root of a positive number. So I pull the negative sign out and I'll write I times the square root of 27. Next, I have another negative sign, so I'm going to pull this out and write I times the square root of 48. Now I need to simplify. 27 is going to be 9 times 3. So I can pull out this 9. The square root of 9 is 3. So I'm ignoring the second half for a second. I'll come back to it. So I can pull this out and I can write this as 3I times the square root of 3. Again, this 9 I can pull outside of the square root sign. Next over here, 48, we recognize that this is going to be 16 times 3. And then again, I can pull out the 16 because the square root of 16 is 4. So 4i times the square root of 3. Again, it's the 16 that I can pull out. Lastly, we're adding these guys together, and now I can sort of reverse distribute. I can pull out the square root of 3, and I can pull out the I, and write this as 3 plus 4 times I square root of 3, and all of this simplifies down to 7i square root of 3. So starting with these two square root signs, we pull out the i's first, simplify everything, and it's pretty nice. Here, again, what we see first is that we have a square root of a negative number. Pull that out and write that as an I. So plus I times the square root of 3 quantity squared. And here, I could FOIL this out because I have a binomial and I'm multiplying it by itself, which is another binomial. But I will use the formula for this. When we square the sum of two things, what I'll do is I'll take the first term and I'll square it. I will add 2 times the first term times the second term, and I will square the last term, plus I times the square root of 3 squared. Again, this is the formula a plus b squared is equal to a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. And I'm just using that formula here. Next, we'll start to simplify. Negative 2 squared, negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. Here, I have 2 times negative 2, so that's negative 4i, the square root of 3. Remember, I'm putting the square root of 3 at the end so that it doesn't look like there's anything else extra underneath the radical sign. And then plus I squared times the square root of 3 squared. And this will simplify. I squared is negative 1, and the square root of 3 squared is 3. So negative 1 times 3 is negative 3. And then again, simplifying, 4 minus 3 is 1, minus 4i square root of 3. And this is in standard form. Real term out front, imaginary term in the back. The last thing that we'll do, again, just another fraction here. This is fairly straightforward. We have a negative sign underneath the radical. So what we do before anything else, rewrite this in terms of I. Again, the square root of negative 12 is going to be I times the square root of 12. And we're dividing everything by 2. So I can write this as negative 14 divided by 2 plus the square root of 12 over 2 times I. Note that I sort of write I by itself at the end of the fraction. And this is just convention. It's not important, but I think it looks nice. Negative 14 divided by 2, we can simplify that. That's simply negative 7. Plus the square root of 12. Well, square root of 12, 12 is 3 times 4. So I can pull the 4 out and write this as 2 times the square root of 3 divided by 2 times I. And 2's cancel, so I have the square root of 3 times I. So again, real part and imaginary part. And I will stop there.